All right, thank y'all for coming out tonight. We are going to call this meeting of the Macon County Planning Board to order. First order of business on the agenda tonight is to introduce our new members, and Mr. John Sherrill, we're glad to have you here with us tonight. Looking forward to working with you. Is there anything you'd like to say, or
No.
how did I get into this maybe? Or?
No, I'm just looking forward to serving and doing what I can to my input on whatever. Hopefully we'll get some things done and work out for the best of people of Macon County.
John, we sure are glad to have you with us. And like I said, look forward to working with you. I think you'll be a real asset to this board. At this time, before we can proceed any farther, we need to hold a special election for the chairman and vice chairman. This will be our annual election. And at this time, we will do it separately. We will elect the chair first and then the vice chair. So at this time, I'll open the floor for any nominations for chairman.
I nominate Matt Mason. I'm just kidding. I second the motion on roll.
Well, we have a motion and a second. Is there any more nominations?
I make a motion nomination cease.
Do we have any further discussion? All in favor of the motion as presented?
Aye.
Now we'll open the floor for... Hello, Joe.
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good job. Hey, that's
how we started.
This is the first time we've ever started on time. Do we want to proceed with the election at this time or go?
That's fine.
This time we'll open the floor for nominations for vice chairman.
I'd like to nominate Jimmy Goodman.
I'll second.
I'd like to nominate Chris Anders.
Hang on a minute.
Man, smoke's coming off Matt's pen over here.
He's still got lead.
All right.
Are there any more nominations? This time I'll close the floor to nominations. First, we'll vote. We had one nomination for Jimmy Goodman. And one for Chris Sanders. All in favor of Jimmy Goodman as vice chairman, please signify by raising your hand and saying aye.
Aye.
Chris Sanders.
Do I have to vote?
What you do you have to vote?
Vote for Chris. 5-4.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that.
Chris Sanders has been elected as vice chairman. This time we'll close the election, and I appreciate the confidence that this board's placed in me to perform the duties of chairman. I've worked with this board for a long time in many different capacities, and the board's ever changing, but with any time the face has changed, the mission still stays the same, and the thankless work that goes into everything we do here, and that's something that never does change and always stays constant. And it's an honor to be a part of this board, and again, I appreciate the confidence that you placed in me to chair this board. It really is an honor, and I sure do appreciate it. Not yet. Approval of the minutes. If you'll look, you should have got a printout, and we voted some time ago to go green, didn't we?
We did.
And so those that have a copy of the June 20th minutes or have read over them, I'll give you time to do that if you haven't had a chance to do so. entertain a motion for approval.
So,
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Next, let's backtrack a little bit. Joe, glad to have you here tonight. This is Joe Deal, for all of you that don't know. Him and John are the two newest members of our board. And Joe, we're glad to have you here tonight. And we're really looking forward to working with you. Think you'll be a great asset to the board. Is there anything that you'd like to?
I look forward to working with the board and having to have a say in things that go on in the county, for now and for the future.
We appreciate every one of you. Commissioner Tate, do you have anything to?
I do. I got a few things. I'll try to make it quickly. So, I'd first like to thank John and Cheryl and Joe Dill. Appreciate all the commissioners. Appreciate y'all's willingness to serve, and I look forward to both of your inputs on this board. This is where my political career started off with this county, and it's an outstanding board. And I think you'll see that everybody in here works hard and cares deeply about this place, and I'm sure both of y'all bring some good insight. I'd also like to congratulate Derek and Chris on their endeavors, and I bet Derek, I bet you never thought 3 years ago that you'd be chairman of this board. Here it is.
Sure did.
So congratulations both of y'all, and I know you'll do a good job. Just to bring you up to speed on a few things from the county. Tonight, we're going to be readdressing the floodplain ordinance. The state didn't take any action as of yet, so I think the commissioners were all, I know all the commissioners are in consensus to go ahead and move forward and get y'all's input and we'll try and take action if the state's not. After that, I got to give Matt credit on this one. He threw out the thought of maybe changing the direction of this board, and let's maybe move on to reviewing the vacant properties, which I mentioned at our last meeting, and again, had unanimous consensus from all the other commissioners to do that. Matt was thinking that there might be some goodwill towards this board to work on a little bit something different other than ordinances and rules and regulations. Let's just have a change of action, and I'm all for that. Number 3 is I know we started the signed ordinance at your last meeting. I have received a little bit of input from Chester on this. He's still doing a little bit more research, and I'll address that at our next meeting. And most of those general questions that you brought up, which I thought were great questions, and he's got some of those answered, and he's still digging. Unfortunately, in the past month, Chester was out for a week for vacation, and he's been dealing with property closing in Highlands, and Jack's upcoming retirement, and numerous other things we had him tasked with, but, not to mention the subdivision ordinance, but that did pass, by the way, unanimously, so I appreciate all your hard work. I think that's it. Is there anything else you think of? That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jimmy. Public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak, or we're certainly glad to have you with us this afternoon.
And I know you won't drive this far without speeding.
I'll just quickly address you all in the context of the floodplain ordinance. For, let's see, 8 years ending last April, I was an environmental consultant and worked all over the Southeast to look at environmental impacts and help permit those and allow those to go forward when they were associated with infrastructure, whether it be highways or pipelines, or impact threatened and endangered species or streams or wetlands. And I helped delineate the resource, whether it be the stream or the wetland, and helped write the permit so those could be impacted to build whatever needed to be built. And in those situations, if you're allowed through state and federal regulation to permit an impact to a natural resource. But when you do that, there are processes in place to ensure that those resources and your impact to those resources is mitigated. So in other words, you make up for the loss to that natural system. You make up for it somewhere else in some other way. In the context of the floodplain, there's not a way to do that. So every time a bit of floodplain is lost, there's no mitigation for that. It's just gone. And I think, as we all know, when there is fill in the floodplain, the likelihood of that fill being removed in the future is extremely, extremely slim. So, once you allow that, go down that road, it's very unlikely that it'll ever get undone, and you'll ever get, excuse me, you'll ever get that piece of the floodplain and all of its functions back. That's it. I just wanted to remind you all of that, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Ben.
I'll speak just briefly. Well, that's okay, Derek. Just briefly, again, I'm Sharon Taylor with Land Trust for Little Tennessee, but as an individual of Macon County, I do want to thank y'all for serving. I know it's a thankless job, and I appreciate all of you serving. And representing the 400-member Land Trust for Little Tennessee, I just want to urge you again to think about the rights of all the citizens of Macon County, not just a few of the citizens of Macon County that own floodplain, and just think about the safety and the consideration, not only the environmental consideration, just the rights of property loss for all the citizens of Macon County, and keep the ordinance as it is.
Thank you. Ms. Taylor?
I would speak just real briefly too. I was here at a meeting when Butch Deal and Kenneth McCaskill and Harold Hutchinson spoke a lot more eloquently than I can, but I'm just a real proponent of agriculture in this county and feel like it is still a viable industry for us and valuable. And again, like Ben said, once you fill these floodplains, that soil is really special soil, and it's where we grow a huge amount of our crops, and I would just hate to see any changes to the current ordinance. I know the Senate bill's still kind of out there hanging over our heads, and that may change everything, but I've been real pleased that we had the specifications in there as they are. So I would just urge you to think about our farmers. Thank you.
Thank you. And you guys have pretty much stayed with us throughout this whole thing and provided so much valuable input, and we really appreciate that. Unfinished business, we're going to continue the discussion of fill in the floodplain. So at this time, I will, Matt, do you have anything new for us? Does everybody have their floodplain ordinances handy?
Mr. Chairman, I've put together basically a thought process or a proposed, if we're going to allow fill, a proposed way to allow fill. And so if it's okay, I'd just like to pass that out.
Sure, absolutely. Who doesn't have an ordinance right now?
Everybody else has to do
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody else has got it.
Yeah, if you're making another, I'll take another.
Make it full. Chris, would you kind of like to, while we're reading this, would you like to give us the Cliff's notes? It's not that long anyway, but just kind of what.
I took a cutoff at a ½ acre for when a more stringent requirement would take place, when the design professional would have to be involved in the fill process. And then I just wrote down or addressed some very standard details or standard specifications that would go with fill in pretty much any situation. Just trying to put something together in writing that at least we have something to talk about.
How does this differ from the proposed change that the planning board has discussed up until now?
I think the proposed change from now was basically you could just dump fill in the floodplain and do what you want with it. It didn't have to be put in. Had to be put in, I guess, per the recommendation. If you went with what Matt said, per those recommendations, which are similar to what I have here.
Right.
This just defines it better. Chris sent this to me this week, and in my opinion, it gives you a little more guidance on acreage size action standards and all that. And we can compare the two with top levels or all that.
What's the pleasure of the board?
On what?
As far as how we're going to evaluate, currently we can leave the ordinance as it is. Matt has provided a recommendation that will be in the ordinance that you're getting and the one that the planning board has discussed until now. And now Chris has brought us another recommendation regarding filling in the floodplain. So do you want to take those three recommendations and let...
First, I would like to, myself, like to be refreshed on the recommendations that was in the last meeting we had. I
Okay.
don't know what
As quick as I get my ordinance back out, I'll be able to better.
There's not a whole lot different in this than what was in there.
No. What page, Chris, in the ordinance?
I'm not asking.
Proposed ordinance.
That's right.
What
It's
page-
different?
what
Oh,
page
it's on
in the-
page 11.
And what is different from what the board has discussed earlier?
There's a requirement in the ordinance, in the proposal that you made, that fill material extend 10 to 15 feet beyond the structure footprint. I didn't have that in the thing I did. And then the other couple items you have here in the erosion control ordinance already, so I've referenced that
Right.
in my recommendations.
And then the density, you need to find that.
This doesn't require density.
It just says must be mechanically compacted at 95%.
Yeah.
And specify the frequency. It doesn't specify if it's standard Proctor, if it's modified Proctor.
Right.
It doesn't specify lift heights and thicknesses, quality of fill material.
The other thing I like about yours, looking at it, is if the board decides to allow fill in the floodplain, it breaks down the guidelines through limitation. You know, a half acre, you get to do certain things, anything over a half acre, you have to do more stringent. If that's what the board's seriously considering allowing, I think this is pretty good material to be considered.
There's one other thing too. They ought to have to provide a lawn field, so the maps can be revised.
I think I've got that on the previous page, but yeah, you have to have a letter of map of
Yeah.
the.
Yeah, you've got it in, you,
Probably get a Colomar and a Lomar.
You'll do a clone more and a little more, and
yeah.
that's letters that you basically apply to FEMA to allow fill and floodplain, and they revise the maps off that. It's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
So basically, right now, if the board votes to allow fill in the floodplain, there is no limitation, half acre, you have to do this, over a half acre, you have to do that. It's just, technically, if I've got 20 acres in the floodplain, I can put 10 of it, I can fill 10 of it if I wanted to.
Without engineering or anything.
Without anything. I
Right.
can just go dump it in there.
Exactly.
As the revision that we have been discussing is written.
Reading this, that's what I like about Chris's, a half acre or something, I see that as more of somebody that owns a piece of property and also wants to put their home there, or their, to develop their property for personal use, not going into a commercial thing. And when you go down to more than that, I think you're gonna probably be doing a big project, and it's gonna cost a lot. It's fair to, if it's your grandfather's property and he gave each grandchild a piece of property, all of a sudden, in a word that is a bad word down here is zoning. And when floodplain was adopted here, didn't you zone essentially everybody's property? Especially if you tell them you can't develop it.
Yes.
In a sense.
Nature kind of zoned the floodplain.
As our ordinance is currently written, Matt, we say that there is no development in the floodplain. What does it say in terms of development?
It doesn't allow fill in the floodplain. If you want to develop in the floodplain, it has to be elevated above base flood elevation, 2 feet above. And then it's in a floodway area, it's have to have a NOAA certification. It doesn't say that it can be done, it says it's more expensive to do it.
Plus, if you build up any land, it has to come from the land that's there. It can't come from the exterior source. Is that correct? I mean, that's really what we're talking about. Because people can move dirt around in the floodplain and build up whatever they want.
They can balance.
As long as they get it from the floodplain.
As long as,
But they cannot bring any dirt from any other piece of property and put it on that floodplain.
So if
The
I need-
likelihood of being able to compact the colluvial soils, the soils in the floodplain, which are there's a lot more fines and there's a lot more moisture in those soils. And so to feasibly be able to compact, fill, you took out of the floodplain back in the floodplain, I don't think that's very
So what you're
realistic.
saying is prohibited fill in the floodplain.
In a roundabout way.
And, no, go ahead.
I was just gonna tell us again, I think we went through this, but let's just say that's my 3 acres over there, the river cut through part of it. Tell me again what I can do to raise the elevation. I know what Chris said about the.
if you've got let's say you've got a half acre that's in the floodplain, inside that half acre, you can move the dirt around as long as your floodplain's still balanced. So if you take 2 feet, if you go down 2 feet, you're gonna raise 2 feet, as long as there's none brought in from outside the floodplain. you can
But
still
back
do
to
it.
what Jimmy said, even though the half acre is in the floodplain, outside the floodplain, I can't push dirt from the upper part down to fill the lower.
Right.
That's correct.
You could have a pond in the floodplain and take that dirt from the pond.
I guess you
And then
could,
build
I
it
guess
up.
technically you could push something down there as long as you amended the maps and went through all that, no way. That's a
I'm just
complicated
asking,
process. Right now, most people would be no.
If it's the same property and you said some of it's in and some of it's out,
That was the example.
if you push dirt down, could you take that amount out as long as,
Yeah.
like if I push 2 foot worth of, so I could get.
Got better soil from above the
Yeah.
floodplain.
You can, as
swap
long as,
that
yeah,
out.
you can take 10 truckloads in as long as you bring 10 out. And you can do that.
same piece of property.
Right.
From the same piece of property.
But not from neighbors.
That's key.
You could, I guess you could use somebody else's property.
If you have,
As long as it balances is all we care about.
if you have a piece of property that part of it's in the flood plain and part of it's not, okay, and you want to push from the part that's not into the flood plain, you can do that, right?
If you want to, let's say you want to put 100 loads in, you've got to take 100 loads out.
Virtually, you can't.
So basically, you're not filling anything unless
Say that again?
you're moving
So
around.
right now you can't.
No filling.
Original captions show what's deleted, underlines what we changed.
It's out for one. Just better make sure of that.
One other thing I'm talking about, 2 foot freeboard.
So, and the 2 foot freeboard,
It ought to be changed to 1, I believe.
we'll make a note of that, and we'll, as quick as we get through with this part right here, we'll move on.
Okay.
We'll move on to that, we'll just keep it. So right now,
I have a few questions. I need to catch up here a little bit.
okay,
On the compaction testing, isn't it required to build anyways? Don't you have to get an engineer to do residential? Or is it only commercial? In any building in Macon County?
If you constructed on fill material and jurisdiction or whoever the inspector was that came out felt that that material was inadequately compacted, as far as I know, it's a judgment call, unless I'm corrected by somebody else on a residential structure.
Yeah,
Has been the case every time.
because I went
I usually just tell people to dig through it, so.
I went through that process, building the produce stand. I had to get an engineer to do a compaction test and get the report and everything else. So my question was, is it different from residential to commercial, or is it required in all applications?
If it's filled there, it's always.
Okay. Then the next thing, I understand that the value of the farmland by the river and everything else, I understand that process, but what is the feel of the will of the people that owns the land by the river? How did this, I've read part of this in the paper where the farmers depend on this land and everything to grow the crops and everything, but at the same time, if I own the land by the river and I wanted to give my child a piece of that land to build on, I think as a property owner I should have that right to do that. So saying that a farmer depends on that property to grow the crops, also the landowner depends on that for their family, for future development, for their family to retain them here. So if they already own the land, to me, I think they should have that right. Is that, where did the dispute coming from the farmers to the landowners and everything else? I just think that, I'd hate to see the farmland disappear, but at the same time, I think the property owner should have the right to be able to build on that property.
If I could interject something in there, being a farmer, having some of that farmland and farming it, not necessarily just what I do with our piece of property, but let's say, neighbor across the river, and we've seen this in some of the places here, go down 441 where some of that floodplain's been already filled in, and they're, say from, I reckon what we call the north stretch there, that water's coming across over onto the other property owners. Well, you may have built up, but what about the 5 or 6 adjoining property owners that are affected? I thought about this quite a bit 50 years ago when there were 20,000 people in Macon County, and now then there's 35, 36,000. That's more people. What we do on our property affects others. I'd say it's a good neighbor not to do something for the sake of our neighbors, but we don't know a lot of our neighbors part of the time. But what we do on our property oftentimes affects those adjacent to us, and maybe negatively. There have been reasons why we haven't filled in the floodplain for thousands of years. I think that needs to be taken into consideration. If you look at the weather we've had here lately, we've gotten lucky with 13 inches of rain in July that parts of our floodplain now aren't 10 feet underwater.
Well, I remember growing up when 441 was a 2-lane road, and I remember that river coming across the road before it was ever turned into so that has been an ongoing thing since I've been around here anyway. So, but I understand, and I understand what you're saying.
Okay, so we have Chris's proposal, and to refresh, Matt, will you just review the change that you had made and the proposed change that we've been discussing? I think, have we discussed,
Well, probably
Chris?
I'm trying to decide which one we want to use.
Right, and I was just going to let Matt refresh everybody on what he had done, just so we can remember.
Letter D talks about fill materials they use in the floodplain. These 5 recommendations came out of that workbook that FEMA has published as recommendations to future rules or ordinances. Was it the material must be of clean soil, free of large rock, construction debris, and organic material? That simply follows the soil erosion ordinance. Material must be mechanically compacted to 95% maximum density. Material must extend at least 10 to 15 feet beyond the footprint of the structure. We that was the reason that was in there, was sort of help protect the structure if something was to fail. Graded side slopes should not be steeper than 2 to 1, and then slopes must be protected against erosion. And then the final sentence says, design professional must certify the fill elevation, compaction, slope, and slope protection measures in order to determine proposed development will be reasonably safe from flooding. And then there's a statement back a couple pages that says that we would be requiring letters of map revision.
So the engineer's looking at this one too.
Yes, it's just, I think Chris breaks it down a little easier, that if you're, to me, looking at it the way, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but from a ½ acre or less, you still have to have it tested and compacted. You just don't have to necessarily, or let's see, compacted.
Right, you would just have the test report submitted to the
Submitted.
floodplain administrator.
And then, but regardless, either way, the surveyor is involved in delineating the field.
Yeah, you're gonna have to have a surveyor involved for flow model.
Right.
I mean, that's a requirement, just by virtue of that.
And then if you go over the ½ acre, that's when basically the engineer takes over and certifies that everything is spec. So it's pretty much reading the same. I think Chris has gone a little bit further than what I proposed.
I think what Matt proposed, if you wanted to put, you know, an 1/8 acre of fill in floodplain, you still have to get the engineer involved.
Back to the discussion we had earlier about foundation for residential or commercial buildings, and you got the inspection department or whoever determined that the fill is not adequately compacted. What do we go about doing? I know Chris said you could dig down to the good dirt, dig down through it, or you could dig it out and put some order in and compact it. How do you make any kind of engineered compaction determination now?
Yes, on the filter, yes.
And who would do that? The customer or the builder, or somebody have to get the,
Yeah, they're expensive to provide evidence that it was compacted.
is it 95% of these buildings?
That's for any house flat, right?
Commercial or the
Usually on spread footings where you have higher loads, that 95% would be 98%. And the slabs would be at 95% because the load is more distributed. So truly, if you're going to build a house on the property with a perimeter footing on a crawl space, for example, you have to do 98%.
Is everybody clear?
Could you build a house like that without putting fill? Could you bring your blocks up and bring your house up and do this?
You could, your driveway would be down in the floodplain. Any of your outdoor equipment would be in the floodplain, whether it be lawnmowers, rakes, tillers, tractors.
AC.
AC.
Yeah.
Well, you have to be elevated. It's all flooding system
You
construction.
build like the beach,
Yeah.
can't live around.
And you can do that now.
Yeah.
The problem I see with it is if you don't allow fill, at least for general residential construction, it limits the people that can live in the floodplain. Your elderly people, you know, that are all,
You're limited to steps.
yeah, you got a lot of steps. That's just one thing I've noticed, so.
And we pretty much determined in past talks that they ain't gonna be no commercial flooding. Is that correct?
I wouldn't go out and say that.
I think they're proposing some commercial development out by the airport in the floodplain right now, aren't they?
They're gonna build any hangars.
That's gonna be right in the middle of the creek anymore.
Another thing that's been pointed out in these meetings that helped me think about it some is, as the ordinance is written, it's not saying that you can't construct in the floodplain or you can't build in the floodplain. It's just saying you can't fill it, and that's one thing that the people that have came to these meetings and talked to us about have been very adamant about getting across to us, and I think we should keep that in mind in these discussions. But with that being said, we've discussed Chris's recommendation. We have a recommendation that's been incorporated into the ordinance, and we have the ordinance as it currently stands. So if it be the pleasure of the board, I think the first thing we need to decide is,
There is a fourth option. We got those, there is the original state minimum standards. That this was originally based on.
right, and the original state minimum standards. So, as we stand here right now, before we go any further with this discussion, I think it would be important for us to vote on whether or not we're going to leave the ordinance as it is now or change it. And from there, we can then vote on the proposals if the vote goes that way. You see where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
So is the board fine with that? And then we'll discuss what you wanted to discuss and any other discussions we have,
As it's needed.
if it's needed. So I would entertain a motion to that effect at this time regarding whether we're going to leave the ordinance as it pertains to field the same, or we're going to change it.
I like the motion to change.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. How many is that now? Motion carries. So, in changing it, we've discussed Chris's option, we saw Matt's option. Would you like for that, Matt to put that into the ordinance and bring it back to us with Chris's option? Or do you want to mix and match it? Is there some things you like about Matt's proposal? Some things you like about Chris's proposal? How should we? What's the pleasure of the board in that respect?
Well, I personally like Chris's better because of setting a minimum before you have to go to the full engineering. I mean, it's definitely got standards, but I think that gives it more to the personal person to go do something on their land, you know, just a residential project. I like Chris's, no offense, man.
No, I like Chris.
I like Chris's just because it spells that out.
The only thing, that 10 or 15 feet outside might ought to be added. Would that make sense?
It makes sense to me, layman, that we need that in there just to remind people that.
Well, I don't, it would seem like you need to come back out of ice where the building was been set.
Especially over the building.
That's the only thing I see.
The 2-to-1 is in there.
He's talking about this.
Talk about making
15
pad.
feet outside the footprint, making a pad there.
We can just add them to the three too.
Why do we really need that?
Well, maybe we don't.
Yeah, I mean, if I was concerned about scour on my footing and erosion, I mean, I could put my footing, 2 or 3 feet below my fill level to provide additional protection. In addition, I mean, this is the floodplain, not the floodway, so we really shouldn't have any, the current should be minimal, and we think that our concerns with scour and protection wouldn't be much of an issue.
Disregard what I said.
Yes, ma'am.
Act like you're white.
Are we just discussing voting on the 2 plans? Or are we gonna go back, have a choice to vote on this, go back to the FEMA plan?
I think that option's certainly there.
That, correct me if I'm wrong, if we wanted to make future recommendations, at the last commissioners meeting, we were asked to go ahead and vote and make the consensus on the film floodplain.
And not any of the other modifications you made in zones.
I've not made any more that are not related to this.
I think that's the only one you made, wasn't it? That is what we've been discussing the whole time. Oh, I'm sorry, Jim.
don't know if I'm saying the same thing as you, Matt, or differently, but I'll tell you the way I understood it. The way I understood it was is that we asked y'all to review the floodplain ordinance. And any changes, deletions, additions, legal line, that's the way I understood it. And I think there was that one particular topic of bill that we wanted y'all to take particular interest to. I think we asked y'all to review it, in my opinion, but maybe you took it wrong, or maybe we're saying the same thing, so.
Originally, I think that was the case. I was just under the impression from the board meeting the other night that they were really wanting a vote back on it. If we want to go ahead and discuss other options in the ordinance, I think we can, as long as everybody understands it's going to take some time more time.
Well, and if I could interject, in terms of filling the floodplain, we've came back with a vote to give to the board tonight. And to satisfy what you and Matt are saying, if we come back with a recommendation on filling the floodplain, and the commissioners had tasked us with reviewing the floodplain ordinance, I think we can come back with a further recommendation, and the FEMA plan is on the table as well for discussion. And if it's the pleasure of the board to do that, I think it's certainly an option. I think that, you know, we've looked at this floodplain ordinance and we haven't looked at the FEMA plan in these discussions. I don't know how prudent it would be to vote to put something in place we haven't looked at and reviewed with respect to ours. But that option's certainly up for discussion, I think.
It says you're the plan administrator. My concern is adding taxpayer dollars to enforce this plan. How's it going to be enforced if you put it in there? If it's the FEMA, is that not up to the state to enforce it?
No, we enforce it now, currently. We have to enforce it.
So anyway, so we have a floodplain administrator. Jackson. Okay.
Well, the only other thing, and I think I mentioned Freeport, everything else, not really anything else.
There's a freeboard and some issues, some RV language already,
yeah.
But that's it.
Well, why can't we just hash them all out while we're into it?
That's completely fine.
Does that make sense?
I think if they'd ask us, like Commissioner Tate said, to review the floodplain ordinance, then I think, you know, we should probably, if you think that if it's the pleasure of the board to review Bill and everything else, then.
I thought that's what we was doing all along, was reviewing the floodplain ordinance in its entirety.
Well, we've reviewed ordinances in the past, and we went through it, you know, and again, it's been a month, over a month, well over a month, 2 months, since we looked at this ordinance, since we've even discussed it. And I'll be honest with you, I've slept since then, and
Won't you let Matt go through the changes he proposed right quick? We've been through this hard on the 11, page 11. What else was there?
the floodplain, the fill in the floodplain was the only change.
There was a sentence on page 10 that changed. It says if fill materials are being placed in the floodplain during development on site, a CLOMAR F or LOMAR F must be submitted for approval. Then of course we just talked about the fill material. And that's pretty much it, except page 16, number 17, we deleted a lot of language in there about the NRCS, the Soil Conservation Service, stream bank restoration. That was basically the only way you could allow fill was through stream bank restoration currently. And I think that's about it.
Matt, deleting that, does that mean that there's flood damage, that instead of emergency watershed protection, or you can go in and fix the, you'll have to have a professional engineer designing your stream bank restoration.
Is the flood
Technically, yes, by the way it is written, but we'll change that. Because yours is USC and ours is. What 17 basically is right now is the only way it allows filling the floodplain is through the NRCS, which is Natural Resource Stream Bank Restoration, or the Department of Agriculture. And the way, and I missed that, obviously, Joe. I was trying to clean it up to where it would allow fill material, but what you're saying is that would have to be engineered. Yeah, and that's something we probably need to change.
So that means that if you had to bring fill in, it would have to meet the standards that we're incorporating for fill right now.
Yes, and since we're incorporating these standards, 17 should probably have some sort of statement in that allows plans approved through the Department of Ag or NRCS to approve without the engineer.
How does the board feel with that? Got a consensus on that?
Is that what you said?
Except wouldn't most stream banks be in the floodway and not the flood plain? So would that change that language?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say a while ago. There's a complete difference between the floodplain and the floodway. Like the floodplain does not go down to the creek, is that correct?
Well, let's say the river gets out or the creek gets out, washes the hole out, because a lot of the land 200 yards away from the stream is actually lower than the river bank or creek bank itself that can get washed out. Had it done in the past before, where, if you need to fix that, it's not necessarily right, that work's not done right on the creek bank, it's actually done maybe 300 or 400 feet away from the stream bank itself.
Okay.
And where that would be different is where they need fill or to rework the soil, it needs to be loose. It'd be kind of crazy to make them compacted
Could there be
when they're leaving.
could there be an exception for agricultural purposes?
I think
You
there
can
is.
do,
Everybody, shouldn't there be anyway?
Not FEMA, everything else.
Not FEMA.
I think you should seriously consider adding that about the NRCS and the Department of Ag for stream
For
bank
purposes of
restoration.
restoration.
Yeah, I think you should seriously think about changing that. You-
So you're gonna make that change for us, Matt? Appreciate it, Joe, thank you.
So restoration will be exempt from any of these bill requirements we're talking about. So, yeah, I just want to be sure.
As long as it's restoration and not, or we're going to restore it, and while we're at it.
No, I.
Yeah, no. We're starting at it.
Now, Joe, Arna do that? What? Oh, we're just playing with you. Got
Yes,
this
please.
list.
I have another dumb question, I guess, but so much of our roads are underwater. How does this affect if you want to put a load of gravel on your road or your driveway or something? Because there's a lot of property in Macon County that the roads goes up the side of the creek with the water. Can you not haul the gravel in, or do you have to go through all this re-gravel a private drive? On the River Road in Colasage, it stays
I
underwater.
think that would be covered under,
Isn't there an incidental fill somewhere, or was that something else?
let me find it, Dave. It's development defines sort of your concern of what any man-made change to improve or unimproved real estate. But then there's substantial improvement to real estate, and I think as long as you weren't substantially improving your driveway, which there's a definition, I think you'd be okay with it.
Is that the floodplain administrator's call?
And substantially improved is defined by 50% of the market value.
If you spend more than 50%.
And it's substantial improvement.
49 is not.
Does that answer your question, Peggy?
Within 1 year, it does also say, too, within 1 year. So I mean, if you put a load of gravel on every year, they don't get to add that up.
Right.
And Mark, that was all the changes that Matt had made.
Well, I thought somebody said something about RVs.
I think that was some more issues that had came up for discussion from amongst the board. So is that something that, are we gonna stop it at Phil, or are we gonna move forward and go through the ordinance again? But like I was saying, I mean, I've slept since then, and there's a lot of,
I'd like to make a motion, if I can get a second on it, that we go home and get our stuff together, because I'm behind on this right now myself. And let's come back next week with an open mind and more learned experience and sit down and talk about it again.
next week, or
Our next meeting.
do you wanna have a special call? We have the recommendation to take back to the board.
Are we in a hurry? Jimmy, are we in a hurry? I ain't worried about it.
And we gave the board, it was on our unfinished business to discuss filling the floodplain. I think that we gave the board the recommendation that we are going to allow filling the floodplain. We just haven't nailed down exactly how it's gonna happen yet. We've been given a proposal tonight, and we're gonna take it home and digest it, I guess if that's the pleasure of the board. Relook at the ordinance, because everybody's a little cloudy on it.
I made that motion.
Well, are we gonna look at the whole ordinance, about maybe changing things in it, the size of the field, or we just talk about the field?
I think the whole ordinance.
Okay.
That's my motion.
And then we're gonna take a vote on the whole ordinance, all the changes in
Yes,
one
yes.
fell swoop, not each individual thing.
Yeah, we'll do all the changes
Okay.
in one fell swoop, with the exception of what we voted on here tonight.
Mr. Chairman, I have a motion and a second on the floor. Would you call the vote?
Is there any more discussion?
I just want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
Last we left this conversation was with the Senate Bill 612, what was going to happen with it. I guess several people know there's another bill out there that may make all of this conversation become mute, which is Senate Bill 112.
That's true.
So we may come back to another meeting and this will be a new point.
Aren't they about to get approved for right now, though?
Yeah, I think they're going out in about 2 weeks.
So it might be next year.
I'd like to make a statement on that point right there is, I don't like when the state comes in and takes our ability to regulate ourselves out of our hands. So I'm completely against that. I would rather do it here locally where I can talk to people I know than I do the state. If they do it, they can do it. Okay? But we need to keep doing this. And I ain't ready today, I'll be honest with you. I wasn't prepared for this. I like to get prepared when I come back, because I just like to be prepared.
Put the batteries in neutral.
Something like that. Well, I just haven't read this, and it's been, what, 3 months?
Yeah. It's been a long time. We have a motion and a second. If there's no more discussion, all in favor of taking this home?
Can I just ask one more question? Just so we can think about where we're going, can somebody throw out there their thought about the RV, just so we can think about that, so we can come back and see? Is there a problem with that?
What I can do is talk to Jack,
Send us out.
and I can use some comparisons on what the building code allows, doesn't allow, versus what we don't allow, versus.
Okay.
Can you just bring that back to the next meeting? Because I'd like to know that, so.
We gonna send it to everybody.
Yes, sir.
Can you send out the FEMA, the original, the one that
The model.
that every other county?
It's not moral.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I throw out another thought on that RV? Right now, the RV development is the biggest land sales going on anywhere. There are more lots selling for RVs at higher prices than the 2 or 3 that I've seen down in Macon County. So I would hate to see the county pass up that opportunity by making it very difficult. because they do like to be close to water. But if they do, you're passing up a good moneymaker.
And they don't require fill in the floodplain. So if you're able to put, get a
Most of
higher.
them do not.
Most of them wouldn't want it.
Well, that's what I'm saying, you would
Well, the idea
lower, that
is
way you
that
don't have to fill the floodplain by using the RV part.
I, for the life of me, cannot understand why we single out one industry in one ordinance. Why do we do that?
What are we singling out, man?
Uh,
'Cause we talked about it.
RV parks is the only industry that has been singled out in this ordinance.
Which way?
It's in there.
And then which way?
Is it in there?
Which way?
Is it in the ordinance to regulate RV parks?
Mobile home park, RV park?
There's a difference now in my mind between mobile home parks and
Yeah,
RV parks.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree 100%.
And this is
But
all,
mobile home
Coach
parks shouldn't even be
parks.
regulated in here either, in my opinion.
I know.
I've always made the assumption if I've got an RV out here and it's about to flood, I can get it out of there or somebody else can live it out for me. Is that true? Is that the way you all look at it?
We just don't allow RVs in a floodway.
Okay.
And if- But we will allow them in the floodplain, and if it's an RV parked in a floodplain, they have to have an emergency evacuation plan, quick connects on the utilities, and a set of keys on site so somebody can get it out of it. All that is to help the owner out. That, what the county don't care.
And they don't have some kind of septic system or something out there, don't
Well, they've got
Yes.
hangars.
But the reason 90% of that about RVs is in about RV park is so that every taxpayer in Macon County doesn't pay for the cleanup on
Well, you've got a safety issue too, if that RV obstructs the flood.
it. A
way,
bridge.
Or hits the bridge and takes that out, then you've got, you know, I understand that.
they? Okay, we still got a motion on the table.
so you never gotta worry about what's going on. All right, we got no further discussion. All signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. When is our next meeting coming up, Matt? There is no new business on the agenda.
This is down here. August the 15th.
August 15th. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So, wait, did we say that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
August 15th, 4 o'clock.
That's our normal meeting, Thursday.
Yes, sir.
I got one thing. By the way y'all spoke tonight, y'all have, you're making a very significant, or potentially a very significant change to a Macon County ordinance that's been in existence for some time. I have sat through every single one of these meetings with y'all, and I've listened to testimony from the public comment on why the ordinance shouldn't be changed. And I have not heard a single person come to these meetings and testify as to why we should allow it. So, from my standpoint as the liaison, I've got to take back to the other commissioners, and I've got to be able to answer the press, and I've got to be able to help potentially sell y'all's idea of why this should happen. The only thing I've heard so far is property rights. Are there other reasons, or what's the reasons? What's the gist? I've heard reasons why you shouldn't allow it, and I've heard testimony, and I've heard testimony that there's opinions that we should allow it. What are those? What are those facts that we're allowing to build? Is it economic impact? Is it, again, I've heard property rights. What are the thoughts on those? I want to be able to answer those questions.
Well, that's what I was asking earlier, was, you know, through reading about the farmers and everything through this, what has been the property owners, you know, are they fighting to have it? If the property owners don't want it to happen, who's driving behind it to make it happen? Who is it?
Well, there's numerous
I can give you
things
an answer on
that it comes up, and I've seen it several times, that there was places where you could have filled in the fringe of the floodplain, and it would have made the construction going on there much better. But because you got that in there, that you can't fill in the floodplain, had to be done some other way, and it caused a lot of problem. And when they built the new school down there, I owed that problem. That waste material, it could have gone and placed, it would have been a whole lot easier to get done away with. But because of that, you couldn't fill in the floodplain, they couldn't put it there. It affects commercial property a whole lot more than it does residential.
But it had to be a thorn in somebody's side to get
Now,
all
I
this.
can tell you specifically where it came from. We had a church here in the county that's wanting to add build in the floodplain to build a parking lot. And they asked us to review it, so it got sent.
Oh, okay.
It got sent to them.
Can I just kind of address that particular example, because I've been on the fence for
That's
this
worse
subject
than-
for a long time. And I did some crude calculations on the flow in the river, a 100-year event, and the approximate flow in the river, at that river section is about 12,000 cubic feet per second during that event at that location. If you fill the proposed 2 acres that I wanted to fill, it changed that flow by 3 cubic feet per second. 12,000 versus 3. I think I heard a lot of emotion when people came and spoke. We had hydrologists that come and spoke, but no one brought us a HEC-RAS or any technical justification for their position. That's how I got to where I am.
Chris, what did that do, I know you say on the flow, what about the velocities?
I just looked at the overall flow of that river section. I just said it was a crude analysis, but no one's come in with technical information to prove otherwise.
Well, the part that you've written called for 95% compaction. The materials that the church put in, they would be able to reach 95% compaction. So that's not going to solve their problem.
They had a $200,000+ problem to be able to use that piece of property. They don't fill.
This will not, and what we're talking about won't let them allow to use that Walmart field.
No, they've still got problems.
Right.
I would like to address John's question there. This has been going on at least 30 years in Macon County, that people have been going back and forth on this. And I think the reason we've not seen the general public in here is they fought it till they're just tired of fighting it. I've seen crowds big enough till they couldn't even get in the community building, and they had cameras set up outside. And I, for one, have been involved for over 30 years. And they're just tired of fighting it now, and a lot of them give up.
So the landowners actually for 30 years has fought to
Yes.
have the right to do this.
To do this and other things that they've been doing, and it has hurt the economic development of Macon County considerable, because a few people will come in and do something that just is not right. We've had one lady in here since I've been on the board, because she bought a lot, almost sight unseen, and couldn't get to it. That's happened. But we've gone to meetings, it's got violent, because people were just opposed to it, and they just don't come out anymore. It's the people that wants things that comes out now, instead of the ones that's opposed to it.
Well, you look at the town of Franklin, it's been, that flood, it's kept the town from entering into FEMA and adopting their ordinance, because the landowners didn't want to fix where they couldn't fit in the floodplain, or couldn't build their building back if something happened to it. There's a lot of people, I think, that would come out if they knew about it and they realized what's going on. Probably a lot of the people would have come.
And I'm not saying that they would, we just haven't had anybody come in yet.
Well, most of the people that complained would have been in favor of it right somewhere working. It's my opinion.
We've got developers right now in Macon County that's developing over in Blue Ridge and in Georgia, and on Facebook this past week, that have been developed in Macon County, and they just left. Not that other places are not as bad, some are, some aren't. And we need that development in the real estate market right now. We need somebody to, we're kind of stalled out.
And I think a lot of people think if this passes and you can fill in the floodplain, there'll be wholesale people going out and filling in the floodplain. But I don't think that's going to happen. It'll be small places here and there that will happen over time, but it's not going to be a whole lot of time because it costs too much to do.
they don't want the rights taken away from them. I'm speaking from a lot of people that have talked to me and encouraged me to get on this board for years, but
Jimmy, the thing that you have to be prepared to respond to those, and you talk about private property rights. I don't care what Chris does on his property, or John, or whoever, but, you know, when it poses a threat to me because mudslides or flooding or something like that, that's when I sit up and pay attention. I'm not real big on what colors the front doors painted and things like that, that maybe the town of Highlands or some of our friends up there get into, but, you know, you've got the flooding issue, you've got the safety issue, you've got mudslide. I mean, there's more to it. You know, it's like the junkyard or the high impact thing. I don't have any problem with Jimmy having it, or whoever, maybe Jimmy's example, having a junkyard, you know, but, you know, where do you draw, you know, it's hard, the aesthetics of it are, you know, a lot of the people who want Jimmy to have, be able to put his junkyard right there, and we saw that, Lamar, when we got to that. If somebody started to put one on their door, you know, they'd be screaming and hollering from now on, you know. So, you know, how do you balance all that? I think that's the thing that planning board's torn between, and also the commissioners.
that junkyard's a simple process, they just never have got on it. Charge them for a car that don't run, they pay taxes on it, they get rid of it.
We poured that out. I wouldn't say it's simple.
About 2 years when you want
We'll
to
say that for
2 years.
I would like to say one thing more about
We worked on
floodplain ordinance, and I thought the intent of even having the FEMA stuff was so people could get flood insurance in the floodplain. And if you don't have it, we don't have some sort of ordinance that they can't get that insurance, is that correct?
We can get it, but it costs a fortune.
Is that what it is? So we don't even have to have the
You
ordinance.
get FEMA rates. Well, the town don't, they're not in it. If I want floodplain, I want flood insurance on my building, the price is prohibitive, I can't afford it.
You're better off filling
So,
your bill.
you just can't,
So.
The other thing is that the county wouldn't receive disaster relief if there was a disaster.
So there's two caveats to it. One is to help people get flood insurance, and the other is to help the county get disaster relief.
yeah.
Jimmy, is that pretty much? Yeah, I think it's clear as mud.
We big head up, man.
Clear as coffee. Thank y'all. I'm excited about this next topic.
Okay, can I ask you a question about that topic?
Sure.
What, see, I really don't, I know you want us to look at the surplus property, but what do you want us to look at it? What's the criteria we need to be looking at?
We'll go over that, and I don't think I've set any criteria. I think I'm expecting y'all to help me come up with that. My thoughts on it are is that if the county has a half-acre parcel in Highlands, and it's been sitting there for 10 years, and we don't, this board or the county doesn't see any use for that, for a transfer station for landfill or any future recreation uses or any future buildings or expansion, why is the county holding on to it? Let's move it out. But if there's...
Conversely, if it is something you see,
if it's something that this board...
You're not going to send it to us in the first place.
Well, I think Matt and I will probably look at that if it's something that's already in our plans. But if it's, say, 3 acres here on the river somewhere, and we see that there might be a potential, I don't know, if there's something crazy out there, frisbee golf or something recreational need, then let's hang on to it and use it in the future. But again, I think there's some potential, just some of the properties I've glanced at offhand. I don't see any, I can't come up with any future use of it. If this board can, I'll take it back to the commissioners that we just move it out.
I'd like to ask Matt a favor if we get into this. Can you bring us back uses that the county would have for the land?
Yeah, that's, what first we're going to do is Justin and I are going to get Jimmy a...
Might ought to dispose of that, because there may be quite a bit more the county alone in the next few years. It's happening in other counties, where they're just leaving, not paying the taxes.
Well, if we got a
Sam.
loan on it,
That's an interesting point.
Yep.
pay the taxes, but I don't have any of them.
There's a lot of places where the bank just turned it over to the county.
Really?
Wow.
I may have to. An example, the gazebo property, the gazebo's on, I understand that the county owns that, but the town leases it. would it not behoove us to look at that to see if it's more credible to sell it to the town?
Trade it to them for water.
What-
Trade it to them for water. That's supposed to be fine.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second. That water doesn't have as much value today as it did 3 or 4 years ago.